even if a mother knows never to make a negative comment about her own daughter's body, God forbid, don't make negative comments about your own either, because that's going to be as powerful in terms of the message.
Today we're joined by author and activist Jean Kilbourne, who was the first to shine a light on how advertising and media distorts women's images and undermine their value throughout their lives, an issue that's of course of critical concern now more than ever. We had a great time talking with Jean and really admire how she continues to stand up for women and affirm their value. Welcome, Jean. We're so excited to have you on the podcast today.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
So you've spent years of your career shining a light on the impact of advertising on women, how it objectifies our bodies, promotes thinness, and really reinforces a lot of very harmful ideals. And you were really ahead of your time. I mean, now there's a lot of conversation about the way in which social media and media in general impacts women. But you were one of the pioneers in this field and really helped to shape how we think about media and its impact on women and body image, of course, in particular. And so we're interested both to hear from you about how media impacts women generally, how advertising impacts the way the culture sees women, and in particular, also interested in how these messages shape women as they age. So as women get older, what do they experience? How does the culture see them? Simone and I are both in our late 30s, and so we're approaching middle age. We're not quite there yet, but certainly aging is more top of mind for us than it's ever been before, and it seems more and more so every year, both the benefits of it, but also our own personal challenges with it, we feel more than ever. So maybe as a starting point, Jean, if we kind of go back in time, tell us about some of the messages that you got around beauty and aging and being a woman when you were growing up.
Sure, I'd love to talk about that, but can I say a little bit about getting into my work?
Yes, absolutely.
You said I actually believe I was the first person to study the image of women in advertising in any kind of systematic way, because I started collecting ads in 1968. So that was really a very long time ago. And at that time, no one thought that advertising was a serious issue. And they certainly didn't think that the image of women in advertising was a serious issue. And in fact, even other feminists would say to me, we're dealing with serious issues like violence against women. We don't have time to deal with trivial issues like the image of women in advertising. Mm-hmm. And I would say they're related. If you objectify women and dehumanize women, you're going to set us up for violence and abuse. And that's what happens. And in fact, now, of course, there's tons of research that indicates that that's the case. But when I started out, which was 60 years ago? Anyway, I can't do the math, but it was a very long time ago. It was considered a radical point of view. And now, of course, it's very mainstream. And a lot of the ideas I had, such as the fact that the very thin models in ads played a role in developing eating disorders, didn't cause them, but played a role, or that the objectification of women, led to a climate in which violence became inevitable. Radical ideas, 50, 60 years ago, now basically generally accepted. So just wanted to throw that in.
Wow, that's amazing. And that you really had to, it sounds like, assert and fight for this idea because it was so radical at the time. And get pushback from fellow feminists too.
Right. Yeah, for
Sounds
sure.
like a big challenge.
Yeah.
What was the moment where you became aware, but also felt you had to speak out about advertising and the way women were being portrayed?
I mean, that's a wonderful question. But I became, like many people in my generation, I was involved in the anti-war movement, the anti-Vietnam War movement, which I know is ancient history now, and then that led many of us into the women's movement, the second wave of feminism, sort of in the late 60s. And I became involved in that very quickly. I mean, I was born a feminist, but there was no encouragement for that when I was growing up. And so I was very interested in feminism I'd been in consciousness raising groups. You know what they were? I mean, we got together in, small groups and began to talk about the ways in which our lives had been affected as women. And each one of us in those days thought that whatever problems we had were individual, sexual harassment, rape, any of those things. We all thought somehow we must have caused them and that we were alone. I mean, it's hard to imagine that that's what we thought, but we did. So getting together in these little groups and learning that not only we were not alone, but that almost every other woman had shared some version of this experience really had an incredible impact. The poet Muriel Rukeyser has a wonderful quote that something like, "What would happen if one woman told the truth about her life? The world would split open." And that is what happened, basically, is we started to tell the truth about our lives, and the world did split open. And so I was already sort of primed for this, and I also had experienced a tremendous amount of discrimination as a woman, of course, and a lot of sexual harassment. And I'd had many, many terrible jobs. And I went to Wellesley College, which is, great college. And in those days, women couldn't go to Harvard or, Yale or Princeton or whatever. But, Wellesley is still a fabulous college. Hillary went there and Madeleine Albright. But after I graduated from Wellesley, I had to go to secretarial school to get a job. So my options were, if I didn't want to get married right away, and I did not, were to become a secretary or a waitress, basically, or a model, which I also did some. We could talk about that. But I had many terrible jobs. One of my jobs was putting ads into the Lancet, which is a British medical journal. And when I say putting, literally placing where the ad would go in the magazine. I mean, not a very high-level job. But one of the ads was an ad for birth control pills. And it was a sort of huge face of a smiling woman. And the copy said, "Ovulin 21 works the way a woman thinks, by weekdays, not by cycle days." And in the woman's head, there were 7 days of the week, 7 boxes with each day of the week. Monday was a laundry basket. Tuesday was an iron. And
wow,
the idea
impressive.
basically, women are too stupid to remember our cycles, but we can remember the days of the week.
Through chores.
Exactly, the chores. And I remember looking at this ad and thinking, this is atrocious and it's not trivial. And I think that was the real insight, that it wasn't trivial, that there was something. This was going into a medical journal. Almost all the doctors were men. And they were going to be looking at this and thinking of this as, I don't know, a real statement about women. So I began to collect ads and put them on my refrigerator with magnets, and gradually I saw a pattern in the ads and the way in which women were objectified and dehumanized and all sorts of things. So that was what sort of I never set out to make a career of this at all. I was just interested, and I just began to collect the data to see what I would find.
Wow, amazing. Where do you think this feminine spirit derived from within yourself? Because it sounds like you said you were born with it. I mean, was it something that you just always experienced as a little girl, or were there people in your life that influenced this kind of feminist outlook and being able to really have this motivation and drive to really notice what was happening?
Well, there was no feminist consciousness, when I was a child, none whatsoever.
Right.
But my experience was, it was very unusual in that my mother died when I was 9, and I had 3 brothers, so I grew up in a male environment basically, and my father was away a lot, so my brothers and I kind of raised ourselves, and I would trade all of this to have my mother back. But I think what it did, in a way, I was a little bit less socialized than some other girls might have been, because I was kind of raised by wolves and I was kind of on my own. I was very autonomous, very independent from a very young age, because I had to be, So, my brothers and I did share things like the cooking and all of that sort of thing. But, I didn't have a parent telling me what to do, basically. And so that had pros and cons, needless to say. But I think that did it gave me a real sort of sense of independence and autonomy at a very early age. And then I went to Wellesley, which is all female and which remains all female. And again, there was no feminist consciousness then. However, all the women in leadership positions were women, right? I mean, the president, the dean, not all the faculty, but a lot of the faculty, but every student who spoke up was a girl. So every leader was a girl. So what I experienced then was being a first class citizen, basically. When I graduated from Wellesley and came back out into the world and was treated as second class, that didn't go over very well with me. So I noticed it, for one thing, and I really resented it. And I mean, I was treated really badly often, the way, women still are. Again, I had very sort of low-level jobs, but just treated as not a very, smart or capable person.
And you could really feel the contrast to how you had grown up and your college experience.
Yeah, not even so much as I'd grown up, but definitely from my college experience. Yeah, sure. So I didn't like that. And when the women's movement came along just a few years later, I was ready for it. And I'd had these jobs, these sort of very boring secretarial jobs. But the other thing I did some of was modeling, because I was really encouraged to do that. In those days, there wasn't any kind of consciousness about why that might be a bad thing. It was one of the few ways a woman could make money, and I modeled for a couple of high-level fashion designers and that sort of thing, and made some money. And it's very seductive because you're, told, how wonderful it's supposed to be. But there was a huge amount of sexual harassment that came with the territory, and just a huge amount, which I guess we all thought, because we, again, weren't thinking in terms of the group, just ourselves, that somehow this was just the way it was, or maybe I was inviting it somehow, And it was very depressing. It was actually soul destroying. So I would do it for a little while, and then, and I had all the experiences that, beautiful young women have of, baby, I'm going to make you a star, you can really go places, and all you need to do is X, I mean, I literally had a manager call me and say, "Go to bed with him, honey. It won't kill you."
Oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway.
Yeah. So you said it destroyed you. I'm curious, as much as you're comfortable sharing, like how do you think being in the modeling industry affected your sense of self and just your sense of value?
Yeah. Well, it was very different, for one thing, in those days, because models weren't celebrities. I mean, that came later. There were a couple of models whose names you might have known, but the supermodel, Cindy Crawford, sort of whole Kate Moss kind of thing, that didn't happen until a little bit later. But so models didn't have the same kind of clout, I guess, that some of the celebrity models would have. And in some ways, I always felt that there was no more insecure group of women than models, because everything depended on our looks, our entire value. And so anything that went wrong, gaining weight, for example, or having blemishes, because in those days there wasn't digital altering that could, fix things. There was just a tremendous amount of insecurity and anxiety, I found, among the other women. And I always was I hope it's all right. I always feel strange sort of talking about having been a beautiful young woman, but it's part of my story, and it's actually kind of important because I got so much attention for that, and was encouraged to model and to enter beauty pageants and that sort of thing. But somehow I always knew that there was a very dark side to this, and that part of it was that I was going to age out, and that there was going to be, I've always said that being a beautiful young woman is like being very rich, but with the absolute knowledge that you're going to be bankrupt at some point. And when I was in my 20s, a man said to me, "Your beauty is an international passport." And I said, "Maybe, but it's going to be revoked." And that's the knowledge always, is that if you're going to be valued for this, you're going to lose it. And people are always sort of waiting for you to lose it, it's like there's a lot of envy and a lot of competition, but there's also the sort of, and I see this now with sort of the celebrities who are growing older, the kind of hostility towards them, as if somehow the fact that they're aging is their fault, or something to be ashamed of. So that was always in the back of my mind. And it's much worse today than it was when I was young. But I never felt comfortable with it. I always felt that it was something, that it was a sort of a gift. It had nothing to do with who I really was. And if anything, it got in the way of who I really was.
Yeah. It's a real false sense of esteem. If people really value me for my appearance and that changes, or day to day it vacillates, it's so contingent on something that has nothing to do with who I am on the inside. Yeah, it's very precarious.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And therefore, and of course, any beautiful women are absolute magnet for narcissistic men, of whom there are plenty.
Right.
And so, narcissistic men are drawn to beautiful women because we see this in our current administration. They want to have arm candy basically, and to be judged by how beautiful. So that sets you up for unbelievably awful relationships.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a real danger, to attach too much of your self-esteem to appearance, right? Because it does fade. And it is harder for women who have been beautiful. I mean, when we did our interview with Mary Piper, she talked about this, like women who are beautiful. It's harder to age. It can be harder to age when so much has been attached to appearance. Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. What do you notice about how the culture views aging and women? What are the messages that you see that are so damaging?
And also, just to add to that too, have you noticed that it's evolved over the decades?
Well, women are encouraged to really feel terror of growing older, because the message that we get, and we've gotten it for a very long time, is that we're going to lose our value and that we're going to lose our sexual desirability, and therefore we're going to become invisible. And in fact, that actually does happen. I mean, women do begin to feel as if we are invisible as we get older. And I think what's the big difference in the years since it's happened to me is that there's, because of all the digital altering and all of the cosmetic surgery and all the stuff that's much more common today than it was when I was young. Not that it didn't exist, but it wasn't sort of as completely normalized as it is now, has made it even more difficult for women. And I see, and also the image, because of it used to be done with Photoshop and everything, but now, a woman who's 80 or 70, 80, whatever, can be seen in a magazine or online or whatever, looking as if she's 40. And you see this all the time. I've seen it with, magazine covers with Cher at 75, or Jane Fonda at 80, or Martha Stewart on the cover of Sports Illustrated at the age of 81. They do not look like that. Nobody could, right? But what it does, they look fine, these women, of course, but they don't look 40 or 35 or however they're supposed to look. But what that does is it gives everybody the message that somehow women could and should look like this as we age if we just tried hard enough, right? If we used the right products or went to the right cosmetic surgeon, or, these days, whatever, took Ozempic or whatever it is we're supposed to do. So therefore, looking older or looking one's age or even close to one's age is seen as failure on the part of a woman in a way that I think does tremendous psychic damage to women.
Well, I just think it's so interesting that, because there's still this consistent pressure on anti-aging and women looking young and getting older being really devalued. I also think it's interesting that more older women now are being portrayed and objectified and sexualized now. Mm-hmm. And I think mainly due to what you're speaking to, Jean, which is that older women look younger. So in some ways, it's this I don't know how to put it, but maybe a contradiction. Like on the one hand, we're valuing older women more, but we're also still seeing them in this sexualized light because there's all these sophisticated anti-aging procedures. So they still appear young and beautiful.
Mm-hmm. But not in real life. Seriously. Yes, a woman who's had good cosmetic surgery can look much younger than she actually is, but she's not going to look like Martha Stewart on the cover of Sports Illustrated. I mean, that's only done through, digital altering. I mean,
Right.
that can't, no amount of cosmetic surgery can make an 81-year-old woman look 40. I mean, just can't. Can make her look 60 maybe, or 65 if it's really good. But so I think that there's this expectation because of the image that's out there of these celebrities who look so wonderful, quote unquote. But I sometimes wonder about them, how they feel, because when they're out in the real world, I mean, they're going to look fine, but they're not going to look like the image that's, online or in the magazines and everything. And so, and it does again, put an enormous amount of pressure on all women to somehow achieve this kind of impossible ideal. And the ideal of beauty has always been impossible for women, no matter what. But it's become, in some ways, even worse now that we're expected to somehow maintain this illusion forever, And again, nobody really can. And why should we? It also takes up so much time and energy and money. I mean,
money,
money,
so expensive.
It's so expensive. And, so I say this as somebody who dyes my hair, and it's expensive. Now, why do I do that? I'm a feminist. I'm, all of this. Well, you're not going to believe this, but the real reason I do it is I don't want to change my wardrobe. And I don't have anything that goes with, gray hair or salt and pepper hair or whatever. I have friends who've done this, when you have to change your entire wardrobe. I just don't feel like doing it. But someday I will, obviously. But I can understand why that could seem like sort of a hypocritical kind of thing. But, I'm not trying to look younger. I just want to keep wearing my brown, clothes.
Right. I'm curious what you've experienced in your process of aging in terms of how you've experienced that people have treated you, having been, a beautiful young woman. You're still beautiful, but growing up and getting older, how that's impacted how you've experienced other people treating you.
Oh, dramatically.
Yeah.
When I was young, I was kind of invisible as a kid. And then when I became 16, I was suddenly highly visible. I mean, suddenly. It was really felt to me like it was almost overnight. And it was seductive, and it was, it was almost like I used to think that I used to wish I had a magic potion that would sort of make people love me somehow, and then all of a sudden it happened. Although again, with pros and cons. So I became highly visible, and the invisibility happens more gradually. It happens. Yeah, it happens much more gradually, actually. And so when I was very young, my teens, my 20s, I would say not a day went by without somebody commenting on my looks. Not a day. It could be a taxi driver. It could be, of course, people on the street. It could be all of that kind of thing. Not a day. And then gradually that began to, sort of become less and less. And then it would depend on how I was dressed or whether I was wearing makeup or not, or that sort of thing. So the invisibility happened much more gradually than the visibility, which at least felt to me as if it happened right away. And there was, in some strange way, I mean, I used to dread it. I used to think, even though I was ambivalent about being valued in this way, I sort of counted on it too. I mean, it does give you a fair amount of power, and you feel the lessening of that power as you grow older. So that is kind of hard. That can be difficult. But it's been much less difficult than I expected it to be. And there's been a tremendous amount of relief that comes with not being a sex object anymore. I mean, there's something about the kind of constant attention, the male gaze, if you will, and also the kind of flip side of that, which is a lot of contempt and hostility. I mean, as any woman knows, walking down the street, if somebody's, harassing you or talking about your looks or something, and you don't smile. I mean, how many times have we been told, smile, honey? And you don't smile, or worse, you give somebody the finger or you tell them to leave you. The hatred and contempt that comes back at you, you whore, you bitch, you, etc. I'm sure you've all experienced this. I mean, this happened a lot. So I was aware of the fact that if I didn't behave in a certain way, the so-called adulation that I was receiving was going to quickly become contempt, quickly. So it really was in many ways the same thing. It really didn't matter. So getting older and not having to deal with that kind of constant, I don't even know what the word for it is, not having to deal with that has been actually quite freeing in a lot of ways.
Yeah, not having to protect yourself all the time.
Constantly, all the time having to protect yourself.
Yeah.
I actually have, a good friend who's known more for her honesty than her tact. But she said to me, I don't know, 20 years ago, she said, growing older is really, really hard. It's hard for me, and I was simply pretty. She said, you were a great beauty. It must be terrible for you. Which is really
it's like
funny,
to Mary
right?
to Mary Pfeiffer's point too.
Yeah, right.
She proclaimed she felt so privileged, feeling very average looking for all of her life because she never had to grapple with that loss.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, I just thought that was so funny. My friend thought she was saying something that, anyway, it was fine, but I thought it was really funny. But it was less, as I said, it's that one of the big surprises of my life has been that it's been much less difficult than I anticipated.
Hi, LoveLink listeners. Our group practice, Modern Mind, is located in New York City with offices in Brooklyn and Manhattan, offering in-person and virtual psychotherapy. We provide individual, couples, and group therapy, as well as ketamine-assisted psychotherapy in conjunction with a psychiatry prescriber. Therapy is a powerful experience that can transform your life and help you live it to its full potential. We're here to help take you where you want to go. To find out more about our practice, visit www.modernmind.co or email info@modernmind.co to be connected with one of our therapists.
So I'm wondering if you've had kind of your own process of working through things that may have been challenging. I mean, you've named some of them, but some of the challenges around aging and moving to this other side, and if there would be advice that you'd give to women who are maybe struggling with some of these fears of aging, how can one kind of move through that in a way that feels supportive to themselves, feels empowering?
We're asking for ourselves too.
Yes, as most of our questions are.
Most of our questions, yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. My daughter is 38. So she's,
same age, same age.
Yeah, a millennial.
Yeah.
And she's dealing with a lot of the same kinds of issues too, but, along, and I was 44 when I had her. So I was very, very lucky. First of all, I think I don't know a woman who isn't struggling with it. So, I just think it comes with the territory that you're going to be struggling with it in a culture in which there's such a cult of youth and such pressure on women to, maintain looking a certain way for the rest of their lives. So I think everybody struggles with it. And I think that one thing that's been helpful for me in my life in general is my close friendships with other women. And how important it is to have those kinds of friendships and to be able to be honest about what's happening to us and also to be funny about it, to have a sort of sense of humor about what's going on too. My friends and I have sort of hilarious conversations about the kind of, the aging spots that we're getting if a butterfly lands. It's ridiculous, but it's very important. That's been incredibly important to me. And of course, the other thing that's important is to sort of focus much more on what you've actually done with your life. And for most of us, not all, but most of us, those of us who are lucky at least, by the time we reach a certain stage in life, there are things we can be very happy or proud about that have absolutely nothing to do with our looks or our bodies, a career maybe that's been very important. My career has been extraordinarily gratifying for me. Being a mother has been very gratifying for me. Not always, but most of the time. Having deep friendships that have, one thing that's actually quite wonderful about growing older is that your friendships have been around for such a long time. I'm still really close with a woman. We became friends when we were 3 years old, and we're still friends, and that's what many years from now. I'm still close to my high school friends. I'm still close to my college friends. And so that means I've had friendships that have lasted 50, 60, 70 years. And that really helps a lot. So all of those things, I think help. It also helps to sort of do whatever one can to resist this culture. I think that the culture for girls and women in particular is really toxic, and that anything we can do supporting organizations that are working on this, or all kinds of things like that, trying to do what we can to sort of make a change in this toxic culture really is helpful. I mean, Mary Pfeiffer talks about that too, and a lot of the wonderful work she's done about that as well. So, I mean, I'm the president of the board now of the National Women's Hall of Fame, and was also, inducted in 2015, which was really lovely. And it's a wonderful organization that hardly anyone's heard of. But our mission is to tell the stories of women who've done important things, but who are not particularly famous. Only about 10% of women in the hall are famous. Most are women who've done actually groundbreaking things, but often are not known. And we want to tell their stories in order to inspire everybody, not just girls, but, boys and young men as well. And to make it clear that women are valuable for so much more than our bodies and our looks, so much more. But since we tend to be valued for that in terms of the popular culture, the advertising and all of that, we need to fight back in every way we can.
I'm curious, because you said you have a daughter who's our age. Did you have this in mind when you were raising her, how to combat some of these messages that she was inevitably going to receive?
Oh, yeah.
And also, full disclosure, I have a daughter too, and she's 4 now, so she's young, and I can really see already through Disney, through movies, through pictures of princesses, all the ways she's absorbing body image, these archetypal standards of beauty. And I worry for her because she is getting so many different messages, and I'm one person. So I'm curious how you thought about that, raising your daughter, what you did to help combat some of those messages.
I mean, I thought about it all the time, and there, yeah. I mean, I used to watch TV shows with her, for example, and ruin them for her. Like, we watched Friends. I mean, because that was her age, right? And I would say things like, "Isn't it interesting that this show is brought to you by Diet Coke, and they're all so incredibly thin?" And she'd roll her eyes. I mean, I really did ruin shows for her, but and I really believe there could not have been a better educated child on the planet about this particular. I mean, this is my field, right? This particular issue. Did that fully protect her? Absolutely not. What happens usually to girls is they feel fine about themselves, or they used to anyway, 7, 8, 9 years old, but they hit adolescence and they hit a wall. And that wall is usually having to do with physical perfection and the body image and all of that. I'd love to say my daughter never hit that wall, but she did. And she came, very close to developing an eating disorder. She's very open about this. I'm not disclosing anything that she doesn't talk about, and it just broke my heart. But it also made me realize that we can't save our children child by child, house by house. You can be the best. I mean, we all try to be, but I mean, the most knowledgeable parent ever. But the culture is so toxic and so powerful that it's not going to be enough. So one of the things I did with my daughter was I formed a group with her best friends and their mothers to talk about a lot of these issues, sort of to try to get through so that the girls would hear from people other than their mothers about these issues. And that helped, I think, a little bit. And my daughter now, by the way, she's fine. She's an ardent feminist. She's, done incredibly wonderful work, et cetera, et cetera. But when she hit that wall of adolescence, I mean, it's really, really hard. So the most important thing for your daughter is that you're her mother and how you act, because she will learn most from that. She will watch. Absolutely. And as Gloria Steinem once said, that we should be incredibly careful never to make negative comments about our own looks or our own bodies, because somewhere a girl is watching. And I think that's really, really important. And so even if a mother knows never to make a negative comment about her own daughter's body, God forbid, don't make negative comments about your own either, because that's going to be as powerful in terms of the message. So my daughter and I have talked a lot about, all these issues and about aging and all of that. But again, it's a toxic culture, and it's going to take profound change in the culture before we really can have girls who grow up with really healthy self-images.
Yeah. I was just thinking about a video that I saw recently of myself when I was 8 years old. And I was very like free and expressive and dancing, like very not unself-conscious.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just remember shortly thereafter, like 11, being very self-conscious. I also developed a mild eating disorder.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like such a big shift in a very, very short amount of time. So helping people women especially, to come back to that like 8-9-year-old energy seems really important.
Right. Absolutely.
And also focusing on adolescence too. I just think that girls who are adolescents are at the most vulnerable time for the way that they relate to their body, because they have no sense of self, no identity, and the only idea they have of their worth is through the way that they look, for at least out in mainstream culture. And so it's just such an impressionable time. And I just love, Jean, that you had this mother-daughter group. I think that's so lovely and such a great idea, and such a good, I think, model for that age, for that particular age.
Absolutely. And things are so much worse now than they were when my daughter was a teenager because of social media. I mean, she, and you two also, right? I mean, you weren't in adolescence, you weren't having to deal with social media. Not yet, right? It was coming, but it wasn't there. It's so much worse for girls now, because now all the filters and the way in which they, their pose and TikTok and all the various stuff. It used to be that girls, well, when I was young, we might compare ourselves to models, let's say. And then, later as time goes by, girls would compare themselves to supermodels, or they compare themselves maybe to their peers. But now girls are comparing themselves to idealized images of themselves. So they're objectifying themselves and posting these idealized images, and then feeling depressed when they see themselves. And that seems to me to make things so much worse than when I was young, or even when my daughter was young.
Absolutely. Yeah. And all the time, I think you spoke to this before, like all the time and energy that is devoted to social media is really scary. I mean, I can speak for even myself. Like if I start going on social media on my phone, I'm like, and it's 30 minutes later, it's like no time has passed.
Right.
And these teenagers are on there for hours and hours and hours a day.
Right.
And they're getting fed the more and more of the images that they're already attracted to, right? So it gets scarier and scarier.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What do you see? I mean, just to sort of another perspective on it, do you have any hope, or is there anything you see that's changing in a positive way for the way women are portrayed in media? Or
well, I think the way that women are portrayed is still pretty awful. And again, even though, yes, there are older women now portrayed, but they're women who are made to look as if they're much, much younger. So the hope I get is from not from anything that's happening sort of in the media, but more from the sort of organizations that have formed to resist it. I have a friend who's just started a brand new project called the Social Media Driver's License, which is helping parents and kids to learn about social media the same way they have to learn about driving a car, to have certain sort of things that can be protective devices that you can sort of have inside yourself. Anyway, it's called the Social Media Driver's License, and it's just launched, and I think it's really good. There are also just many, many, many organizations that are working on these issues. A lot of them, I have a resource list on my website, and there are a lot of organizations there. Media literacy is really huge. I think that that's incredibly important. And I've always been an advocate for media literacy, which is teaching people to be, really knowledgeable about the media. We are the only country in the world that does not in the developed world, that does not teach media literacy, in the schools, and we desperately need it. So there are things like the National Association for Media Literacy and many other organizations that are doing that sort of thing. So those things are all helpful, I think, and anything that can be done to, have images of older women that really celebrate their vitality and their wisdom and their et cetera, and not necessarily their beauty, or if it's their beauty, it's the beauty the way it really is, not they've been made to look so much younger. I frankly find this a hard time in our country to be feeling very hopeful about anything, but and one of the things that's really been discouraging for me is the fact that how we're rolling back women's rights, of course, but also I know that I have friends who have been plus size models, and that business has just dried up. And part of the reason is Ozempic, and the fact that women who can afford it can now lose huge amounts of weight, very quickly. But another part of it is the whole kind of backwards sort of culture that we're in right now in terms of women. And so it's once again being very, very thin is the ideal. And the whole body positivity movement has really sort of gone away too. And so it's a very difficult time. I mean, it's a difficult time in our culture in general, in our history. And I think it's particularly a difficult time for women and girls.
Yeah, which is why it feels really, part of the reason why Simone and I decided to start interviewing older women, including our mothers, is just to learn from them. It's like, this is so helpful just to talk to you, Jean, to learn from you, to hear about what it's like to age, to feel less alone with it, because it can feel really scary and really isolating. And women don't talk very much about aging. And there's not a lot of like intergenerational conversations happening around aging, which I think would be really important. Just so that women can connect more around this experience, which is really, really hard.
Absolutely. And I think intergenerational is really good. Another thing I just want to touch on is the double standard of aging, because it really is different for men than it is for women. It's radically different for men than it is for women. And so men are basically, there's a little bit more pressure on men to look a certain way when they're young now than there used to be. But as men grow older, first of all, what matters for men is how much money they have, which is, a problem in and of itself. But in general, men who are older show signs of aging, grayish hair, graying hair, wrinkles, that sort of thing, are still considered attractive, and often considered attractive way into, their 70s, 80s, and I don't mean attractive for their age. I mean attractive. And that there's just no comparable standard for women at all. And the older male actors, for example, continue to play with women who are against women who are the same age, the same age that they've been, somebody like, I don't know, Tom Cruise or somebody at the age of 25 is playing opposite a 25-year-old. At the age of 50, he's playing opposite a 25-year-old. It just never, the double standard of aging is just really, really so obvious. And it's also so incredibly harmful, because it's also part of what makes women seem invisible and less desirable. I see that as a huge problem.
Hugely problematic. One positive thing that I have noticed, it's less in mainstream films and mainstream media, or like at least magazines and advertising, but I have noticed a lot more conversations around aging as it relates to like perimenopause, menopause, like that was just never a conversation that I heard about when I was younger. Of course, I was younger, but I think women in general didn't talk about it. I've talked to my mom, who has shared that no women were really relating and connecting around that issue. It was a very hidden issue that women went through. And now I hear about it all the time. So I do think there are things, and this is more behind the scenes, like personal relationships, podcasts, maybe books. But I have hope that more women are really focusing on putting more emphasis and value, as you mentioned, Jean, on friendships and really sharing with each other and really seeking support, that there is less loneliness around some of these particularly aging issues as it relates to women. So I'm hopeful
And of
about
course,
that.
Miranda July has done a lot to bring
Exactly. That's what I'm
amazing to
thinking.
just bring
Yeah.
perimenopause up front.
Yeah.
I also
She's
another
so cool.
positive thing I should have mentioned is that there are a couple of TV shows now that have older women in lead, like Kathy Bates in Matlock. I don't know if you've seen that. It is fabulous. I mean, Matlock was an old show, you know, with of course a male protagonist whenever long time ago. So Kathy Bates, who's 70 at least, is the lead in this revival of Matlock. And she looks great, but she does not look like she's 40. I mean, she looks like, you know, she's an older woman. And her secret weapon, she's a detective, and her secret weapon is her invisibility because of her age. Is that she's able to be in the room when people are talking about stuff and they don't notice she's there, right? So, I mean, it's really,
I love that.
It's really brilliant. And the other is Hacks. Do you watch that? HACKS, Hacks with Smart and Jean Smart. So Jean Smart is in her 70s and she's amazing. It's a fabulous show. It's also been a hit show. And as is Matlock, by the way. So the fact that two really good television shows have women in their 70s as the lead, that's terrific. So we need more of that, of course, but it's a good sign. It's a very good sign. And neither of these women are there because of their beauty. I mean, in Kathy Bates's case, she's a great detective, and in Jean Smart's case, I mean, happens to be beautiful, but she's also very funny, and that's the real thing. She's a comedian, so anyway, it's terrific.
So maybe as we're coming to a close with this interview, we're wondering what you're up to these days, Jean, what you're focused on and working on.
I'm focused on actually several things. I mean, I've made a lot of films and written books, but mostly I was a public speaker for the past, 40 or 50 years. And in the beginning was doing like 100 lectures a year and, out on the road all the time. So I made Killing Us Softly, Advertising's Image of Women in 1979. And in today's language, it went viral. It's become sort of one of the most popular educational films of all time. And I've remade it 3 times. But the last time I made it was Killing Us Softly 4, 2010, which is already 15 years ago and before social media. So I'm thinking about doing Killing Us Softly 5. So that's a big project. That would be something I'm going to do. I always wanted to do a memoir, and maybe everybody else is doing one. Why can't I? So I've gotten a lot of encouragement to do that, but again, it takes a lot of time. I am, as I mentioned, I'm the president of the board of the National Women's Hall of Fame, and I'm doing quite a lot to try and help that organization become more recognized and have people understand more about what it is we're trying to do, which again is to tell the stories of unrecognized women, not famous women. The name is a little bit misleading in a way. I also, I'm trying to, I think one thing about, being older, I think it's Edith Wharton who has this wonderful thing about take pleasure, to enjoy life's small pleasures, and I feel like I'm trying to do sort of more, and particularly in this toxic moment in time when I'm feeling quite anxious and distressed and depressed, as many of us are. I'm trying to just sort of take walks with my dog, and I sort of stay in the moment and try not to feel too much dread about the future. And I'm not talking about my personal future. I'm, talking about the world. So, and spending time with friends. I'm at the age where I'm losing friends very fast. I've lost 2 of my 3 brothers in the past 10 years. I've lost many, many, many friends. And that's something that's just going to keep happening, And so I'm trying to spend time with the people who are, whom I love, and also, and this is something we all should do, let them all know how much I love them, I mean, don't wait, because when they're gone, they're gone. And so I think that's something that's very important. And of course, I'm spending as much time with my daughter as she'll allow. I mean, she's very busy, but we do spend time together, and she's, among other things, my daughter is incredibly funny, and it's really fun to be with her. So she always makes me laugh. So those are some of the.
What a rich life you're living. I mean, both professionally and personally.
I feel incredibly lucky. Well, actually, another thing, and I'm very open about this, is I'm a sober alcoholic, and I've been sober for almost 50 years. So none of this would have been possible for me had that not happened. And I like to say that because one important thing for people to do, I think, in general, is to kick their addictions, whatever they might be, whether it to be the alcohol or food or eating disorders or whatever, to get help and get into recovery, because without that, it's going to kill you. But in recovery, then the whole world opens up in a way that would not have been possible otherwise at all. Would never have been possible. I mean, all of my career, everything, has been made possible by the fact that I was lucky enough to recover when I was still quite young and still sort of in the middle stages before much damage had been done. So,
thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I think it's really important for people to know. No.
Yeah. Oh,
And almost
absolutely.
we've all been affected, pretty much all. I don't know anybody who hasn't been affected by alcoholism or another addiction, maybe not personally, but in our families or, friends, whatever.
Well, Jean, thank you so much for being with us today. This was such a enlightening and thoughtful and thought-provoking conversation. So we so appreciate you joining us.
Well, thank you for doing it and for all that you're doing. It's really wonderful. I'm so happy that you two are both therapists. That's really great. You're also both very beautiful, by the way. Those of you who are listening may not know, but I am speaking to two very beautiful women. So here we are.
Slowly losing it and trying to embrace other values.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the other thing is don't even think about losing it. The age at which you're so-called going to lose it is getting older and older. So nothing to worry about for a long, long time. The two of you.